What do you think about when the word creativity is mentioned? Maybe you think of people you know who are creative. Perhaps you think of some creative cooks or writers or potters like Peter Swanson or Grayson Perry. I've had the privilege to get to know two extremely skillful and creative academics. The first is my long-term collaborator, musician and academic David Carlis. The second is Erik Hemmingsson. I first met Erik while we were studying for our PhDs at the University of Bristol, and we've remained close friends. In February this year, David and I visited Erik in his home in Stockholm, Sweden, and we got to see firsthand many of his amazing paintings. We also had the opportunity to talk with Erik a little bit about his work and research in the field of obesity. In this programme, I talked with Erik about his perceptions about creativity. I'm here with my wonderful friend Erik, and we did our PhDs together in Bristol. And at the time, Erik, you were studying obesity, is that right?
Yeah, and I still am.
You still are. And you have two PhDs, and you worked for a long time at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, the Karolinska Institute. And you're also a painter. And what I would say is a very creative, one of the most creative people I've known during my academic life. So can you tell me about how you square that? Because most people seem to think science is over here and art is over here. And obviously you exist in both of those polar opposites. So
yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, they enrich each other. So we have like two hemispheres of the brain, left brain, right brain, and we might as well use both of them. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoy being, the typical academic, you could say, in terms of my work. And
could you just explain a bit about the work that you're doing and how you going from Bristol, what you were studying and what you were interested in?
Well, at Bristol, this was over 20 years ago now, but I was doing physical activity and obesity. And obesity has always interested me because it's this in-between condition, you could say, between, there are so many different worlds contained within the field of obesity. We have the medical aspect, you have the social, psychological, financial, so many different dimensions contained within that field. And so I sort of migrated I've always been migrating. I never really believed in making plans. So I play as I go along. I'm a bit like a jazz musician that way. And so the work I do today is mainly epidemiology. So an obesity epidemiologist focusing on social factors, because obesity has very powerful fundamental roots in social factors, like poverty, lack of education, stress, so on. But that wasn't my plan. That was certainly not what I was doing at Bristol. I just happened to be there, and I'm sure I'm going to migrate elsewhere. But I really feel at home here and feel that I can make a big contribution to understanding this disease and helping people with obesity and fighting prejudice with science, for example. That's another huge task. And just widen people's perspectives, because there's this very toxic narrative that people with obesity are very weak-minded, lacking character, and so on. That's certainly not the case. That's just, I was going to say evil, but it's certainly very uninformed, very prejudiced, very harmful, toxic narrative. And so, yeah, I'm kind of fighting that fight a little bit as well today. But again, I don't really have a plan. I just do what I feel is meaningful and rewarding.
Mm-hmm. So you wrote a book a couple of years ago. What was that called?
Well, the Swedish title was Slutbantat, which is, if an English person read that, it would be really unfortunate. But it's basically don't diet, stop dieting. And so I explain how the body functions in a physiological sense, how it really defends against a lower body weight. That's why people lose weight, but they will regain. It's very carefully regulated by forces that most people are completely unaware of. So I just talked about alternative solutions to dieting, and really focusing on health, focusing on well-being, like internal aspects, and breaking the psychological cycle of dieting and being self-judging, and finding more, you could say, self-love, self-compassion, and stop those destructive behaviors, destructive mental patterns, and find something a lot more kind, and something that really works long term.
So could I ask you, what for you does creativity mean or evoke when you think about it?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I would have to say that creativity really, in a very fundamental way, is what defines us. So if you go into a kindergarten, playground, you see young children are, in many ways, they're uncorrupted. And just look at the amount and intensity of creativity that they are constantly engaged in. They are young creators. And then I see how school and parenting and so on gradually, the child is forced to conform, and many of them drift away from creativity into theoretical subjects, into more like the left brain domain, away from the creative side, and more into the thinking realm. And but creativity is just being in that flow, being in that natural state where we are creating. Creativity can happen in so many different ways. I mean, you and me having a conversation, that's a creative endeavor. And it doesn't have to be something typical like playing music or painting. Creativity happens. If you're a restaurant owner, for example, you are being creative. If you're in a work, depending on what type of work it is, you need to have a little bit of a creative spirit, you could say, spark. But it's really coming back to the essence of what we are. We are creators. We're obviously not just creators, but we are tiny creators.
I've always
have forgotten.
When I go to the beach, I'm always amazed at how creative people can be when they escape their everyday lives. And you see lots of dads and grown men creating sandcastles and diverting water courses on the beach and digging away and making sandcastles shapes and mermaids and getting seaweed for the hair and arranging the shells. And everyone is being so industrious all over the beach, thousands of people. And then they go back to their lives, and I wonder, what are they going to do next week? Because they won't be doing that in their gardens.
Yeah, precisely. So just observe yourself when you're in that very free space, when there is no pressure. I usually tell my students, and anyone who wants to listen, just play with the idea that you're a billionaire, and you don't have to make any money ever again. What would you like to do? What would you spend your time on?
Yes.
So some people just wouldn't understand the question hardly. What do you mean? But after a while, I think most people would realize, well, I would really like to maybe try pottery or drawing more, or maybe growing my garden. I would spend more time with my children. I would get a dog. I would, quit my job with that abusive boss or colleagues I don't really like. So in actuality, when we think about it, we put up with a lot of BS in our lives. And some of that is obviously not necessarily a bad thing, but much of it really is. It really isn't very creative, and we're not really contributing. We're only here for a short while, and make the most of it. So what kind of legacy would you like to give to the world? And creativity, for me, that's when we express the unique part of ourselves, because you're unique in many ways. I think I am, And everyone who's listening to this, I can promise you, you are unique as well. And, you know, the more of that uniqueness you bring into the world, the more you enrich the world. And we need that as well. It's like that also that kind of problem solving ability, you could say, because we're facing huge problems, obviously. And if we can bring that creativity to the table, my goodness, we would solve a lot of our problems, surely.
Yeah.
So this is not just playing on the beach, which is one part of it, but it's also pretty damn important.
Yeah. So could I take you back to your upbringing and your childhood? Would you have said that you were always, or would you have self-defined, self-identified as someone who is creative? Or did you just carry on your own way, and one day you thought, actually, I'm creative? You know, what was the genesis behind, you know, what we see when we would meet you now?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I was quite creative as a child. I always used to draw a lot, and I'm quite an introvert in many ways. I think like many academics are. I'm not a social weirdo in a way. I'm not really. But I do like to spend time on my own. I just have a very, when I'm in that kind of flow, creative flow, when I'm writing or painting, whatever it is, it just makes me feel really good. And I remember that from my childhood, just spending hours drawing. And I think I managed to keep that better than most. But when I was going through school, I remember, you know, being sort of compressed into a tighter box. This is what's expected of you now. And, you know, we get graded and so on. Always this kind of external, what I think actually is quite harsh to really force someone, especially a child, into this narrow world where we need to perform, and if we perform better, we're rewarded and so on, as opposed to just being ourselves. Because, I mean, look at the, you know, if people were just children were left alone a little bit more, or if their unique abilities were appreciated and cultivated a bit more, we would, I think, be much richer as a species, you could say. But I had a few dormant years, you could say, and it was really when I was getting into my MSc and then PhD that you know, you get a lot of freedom to decide. And I would say I was quite a lot in my left brain. I was logical and working hard and so on. But then I gradually rediscovered my more, you could say, creative sides, and also finding ways of connecting really creative, free thinking, you could say spiritual ideas with the more kind of logical, research oriented mind.
Was there a catalyst to that happening?
Not sure. I'm just one of those people. We'll be talking about this before we started recording, but I'm absolutely awful at doing things I don't like. Don't ask me to do anything I don't like doing. Just pointless. And vice versa. If I find something really enjoyable and meaningful, I will work quite hard. Like writing that book was a lot of fun. Writing some papers, teaching courses. They're very meaningful, fun endeavors. And I would say I was, you know, just, I think especially actually during my PhD, because a PhD is quite a tough undertaking.
Yes.
And it's quite monotonous in a way.
Yeah.
And a little bit boring, at least in periods. And I just needed to do something else because I was getting bored, I think. And so that's when I started painting again. This was 20 years ago now, really just getting back to something very creative. And as a complement, you know, to keep me sane, I suppose, in a way, to keep things balanced, you know, and that really helped me.
So I suppose that's when I sort of became aware that you would use art or paint as a medium to express yourself and to explore different concepts and things that were going on inside. And you talked a little bit about that process when I think it would have been maybe about 15 years ago that we came to visit you in your summer house, was
Yeah.
it? And you had a big canvas that you were working on in the garden, and that was the first time I'd seen your art. And I thought, wow, it's really distinctive, it's very different. What's going on there? So what's your process when you're starting to do all of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I often wondered myself, but I have this belief that we're really, in a sense, like a conduit down here. And the more I kind of leave my conscious self out of it, the better.
Mm.
So I just need to go on instinct, go by feel, use my intuition. If something feels good, I will go that way. It's very intuitive. It's very immediate, you could say. So I don't have a plan. I think you can possibly see some paintings here in
Yeah.
the background. I mean, I don't have a plan. I just get the canvas stretched, and then I mix the paints. These are all oil paintings, and then I just go for it. I have no idea what's going to happen, and the less you could say, I wed myself to a particular image or something, the worse it gets. So I just need to go with the flow, relax, and have faith. And then it's a very interesting process, almost like a dance, where my conscious self and more my unconscious self will work it out. It's about letting go, really, letting go. Because when I do epidemiology, I'm obviously not letting go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very careful, I'm very meticulous, you could say. And this is just a very different process, letting go. And we were talking about childhood previously, just finding my inner child, because my inner child is someone who's very mischievous, funny, likes to just go for things and not think so much. Because I think that's partly my problem, many other people's problems as well, is that we just overthink things. And let's just go for it instead.
One of the things that I suppose concern me is how in schooling or maybe at universities we create this feeling that there's a right way and a wrong way, and that we evaluate what people are doing to the extent that people are frightened to try. And so when you described just having a go, there's lots of people I can think of who would be too frightened to just do that, who have been evaluated so much they don't want to make a mistake. And so it's how do we then release that potential that is within those people to become more creative, and in doing so it will help everything in their life, but at the moment they've been too held back.
It's an excellent question, and my answer is to do it very gradually. And it's a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And totally understandable. I mean, absolutely understandable, because we are very harsh to ourselves. We're very fierce critics ourselves. There's a lot of self-judgment, but that comes also from very early on, when teachers, parents, siblings, and so on, coaches, we're quite critical in our communication.
Yes.
And you're not doing this well, you need to think about this, and so on. And the whole academic setup is very critical.
Yes.
And we just critique a lot. And my personal opinion is that a lot of that is just projection. It's just if it's painful to go to yourself and find the errors and the flaws, so it's easy to take it out on someone else or students. But lack of confidence, and I totally understand that. I mean, I had my first exhibition in 2017. I'd been painting for a lot of years before then, but I didn't feel confident really displaying it. And that took quite a bit of working up of courage. but my suggestion is to do it by baby steps, and show your friends, show your boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe parents, and then you take it from there slowly, build up confidence. Because this is, it can't, you're showing yourself, you're not hiding anymore, because most people are actually in hiding. Their true authentic self tends to be, well hidden, unless it's a very small group who really you can show yourself to and feel comfortable, feel relaxed. Which is something we have to work with collectively and individually.
I suppose when I think back about across my life, I can see where I have been creative. When I was playing golf, it would be the shaping of shots and learning to hit it right to left and high and low that was really fun to do. And I've seen that with my painting and music and things like that. But I don't think when I was younger I would ever have called myself creative, and I haven't gone out to be creative. But now there's almost a narrative that, now we have to be creative, so you have to go on a course for creativity. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's I mean, the expression "we have to be creative." Yes, but we always have to be creative, and I think we get very I don't know. It's almost a contradiction of term. We have to be creative because it's creativity is flowing when we relax. And at least from my perspective, I think I can force myself to be creative to a certain extent, but it's going to be, the way I see it, it's going to be lower level creativity. And I know I've got a lot higher potential. I can be creative at a much higher level. But maybe it's a good starting point to really, if you, let's say you try something creative, like if you do a pottery course or something similar, and you just follow the instructions. So it's not going to be very high creativity, but it can be of a certain level, and then you can build up from there. But it's like when a huge corporation is talking about, or world leaders are talking about, we have to be creative to solve the climate crisis or something like that. Well, it's like, that's just an empty phrase. That's just BS. And so, different ways of thinking about creativity. I think about it as the unique ability of an individual to really create something unique. Obviously, we can co-create with other people, people that you feel aligned with, who you work well together, and you can be creative. For example, in a family situation, parents can be very creative in handling their children, for example, or whatever it is. So yes, work together creatively, but it's one of those buzzwords, and maybe stolen to a certain extent.
Yes.
But,
yes. That's wonderful. It's been really lovely chatting to you.
Hey, likewise. I mean, I could ask you a million things about creativity. I mean, you're a very creative person. So, yeah, and to everyone who's listening,
if you had to ask me 2 questions, what would they be?
In terms of creativity? Well, what do you like to do to be creative?
I think it's very much part of my nature. So, there's a lot of research being done that when children go to school, they are taught to conform and they lose their creativity. I felt that whatever's happened in my life, I've managed to hold on to it. So whatever it is I do, I approach it with a lot of creativity. And if it's academic stuff, I'm all the time feeling squeezed to do it in a more conformed way than I would do it naturally.
Yes.
So I am continually holding my nature at bay and back. But what I've noticed is if I go into the kitchen, I've learned certain recipes, but so my nature wants to explore and experiment with them and see where I can take it. And if I go and stay in someone's house, my head is thinking, well, why have they put that there? I put that over there and put the bed over there and put that, and why have they done it this color? So I'm continually rewriting and redrawing and recoloring everything I see. And that's I suppose in some ways a problem, because I can't go in and change other people's houses. But in some ways I've recognized that is in my being, is part of me. So I'm pleased it hasn't been knocked out of me, and it comes out in me wanting to try everything. When people say, what are you? Well, I'm a creative being and I want to have a go at everything. And in life we're told, well, you're supposed to have an occupation. And I think nowadays people are allowed to have portfolio careers and do lots of different things. But traditionally, certainly in the UK, my father was told he had a job for life when he left school, and that didn't really suit him. So it's all those times recognizing in yourself what feels authentic and is a way to express yourself. So I feel creative in whatever I'm doing, and it's the world, I suppose, is in tension with me. It's not wanting me to do all the things I want to do in the way I want to do them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It really boils down to integrity. A lot of personal integrity. I mean, I've known you for so long now that I know you're a person of immense integrity. And that's really something valuable, hold on to it and don't sell out. And do what is authentic to you. And if you have this gut feeling, say no, then say no. Don't play the game, and you will be rewarded so much. But it's not easy, this integrity that you're talking about. We've got to hold on to it. But there's a lot of pressure out there.
Well, certainly, say in research terms, which is, I think, one way that we're coming at it for this, to understand another person's life. And you talked about within obesity, people often have a very narrow, superficial view about why somebody eats a lot and becomes fat. But there's a whole other world there if we want to delve beneath the surface. But we can't do that with the traditional tools. So we academics need to change, to grow, to look, to explore, if we want to understand the other. And we can do that through lots of different ways.
Certainly, yeah. But academia is full of ideas about what should or should not be done. And when someone says should not be done, then that's when you need to think really carefully about doing it.
Is that when your alarm bells start ringing?
I hear this loud bell now. But certainly in terms of understanding human being, every human being counts. Everyone's unique, and they've got a unique story to tell. Just we're super bad at asking questions and listening, and really trying to understand people on a deeper level. That's really where we need to do a lot better. I know you're contributing to this field, and I try to, and I hope some of you who are listening to this will really have a crack at doing that, because that's where we need to go, I think.
Erik, I'm going to switch the recorder off. Thank you so much for your time. That was absolutely fantastic.
Yay.